Alright, now it's time to do some recon in terms to see what the Black Knight is doing with the place, and exactly if we can get the cane back.
Sly, it appears the Black Knight has a patrol moving an object in a locked case through the
It's like a
tunnel.
coffin.
From the level of security, I'd bet the farm it's Galleth's cane.
You have a farm?
Just
Which
get over
kind of
there.
makes me
It
wonder
was Galleth's
why
tunnel.
didn't he
The
already
Black
give
Knight
it to
almost
the
releases
Paradox?
Galleth, and when he does, it's only to
I guess the Black Knight has to wait until the Paradox shows up. It's like with the Grease, it's only timed deliveries.
Time to join the parade.
Sly, before you make a move,
Actually, it's never really explained how time travel even controls where you show up in these locations, so...
I already mentioned that this is actually one potential problem. Alright, what you're supposed to do is, first of all, just take photos of the place, like or photos of the entire parade, like Bentley
Just-
suggested, before doing anything else.
Hey, it's just
Also,
like
sorry,
old
Malgato
times.
fucked up a bit.
Hey, Tio,
Seems
just
like
like
it,
old
yeah.
times, eh?
Also, if you are being a keen hearing, this music is another one that was used in PlayStation Stars Battle Royale.
This thing doesn't have a flash.
Oh, what was Sly Stage in PSBR?
There were, okay, two combinations. One is a more clever one, where it's the stay from the first Infamous that transitions into as a more colorful and cartoony Sly setting with Carmeta trying to shoot the stage. But the main Sly stage is the one based on the first level of the first game, the road towards Carmeta's office, that then transitions into, I forgot its name, the main villain from Little Big Planet 2.
Huh. Neat. If I recall correctly, wasn't Sly one of the more broken characters in that game?
No, that will be Raiden. Raiden and Kratos are still
Oh,
actually the
yeah,
broken, even after all
yeah.
the patches. Sackboy at some point was actually tier 0 and they had to nerf him big time.
And then you got poor Sir Daniel.
I guess, yeah, poor Sir Daniel Vortex Q never had much of a chance. Though I would argue it's still fun to play, if there's anything worth. But to talk also about that, it's interesting to say, probably because of marketing towards this game as well, but Sly actually was one of the very first characters revealed for the game. It was actually the first of the Trinity of the PS2 to be revealed, and part of the initial roster that was unveiled. Again, the overall roster of PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale is not much, but it arguably does contain a lot of essentials, and the PS2 Trinity was one of the things that was discussed in early stages by the fans. Will all of them show up in what capacity,
It makes it
and
all...
Sly was like front and center. That was actually very surprising that he was there instead of like say Jack and Daxter.
It makes it all the more baffling that after Thieves in Time just, well, screwed the
Right.
pooch, well, ever since then, it's like Sony were trying to pretend he didn't exist. Like, he didn't
Like
even
I
get
said,
a PS4
like I said,
remaster compilation or whatnot.
between this and PlayStation Stars Battle Royale, I get the idea Sony just wanted to cut away most of their experimental phases, going through teams that were not necessarily just attached to them, unless it was like a safe bet. Because both with this and the PlayStation Stars Battle Royale, never mind the fact that Super Bowl was actually formed by Sony themselves for that specific task. But it's a story for another time.
I guess, to be
They
fair...
just decided to just drop it in order to not lose that much money, which on an economic standpoint, I actually understand. It's just a bit sad that things ended up this way for all
Okay.
things.
Here's the problem with the economic standpoint of things with a lot of companies. One, they always just focus on, oh, this didn't make us a gajillion dollars here and there. Sometimes sometimes it can be based off of their expectations, which are sometimes absolutely ludicrous, which is not fair. In other
I
cases,
mention again, that period where Square Enix wanted every
Tomb
single
Raider.
game that they gave us to sell 10 million units.
Again, Tomb Raider 2013 is one of the crowning examples of that.
Anyway, the second point also in regards to that, though, it also doesn't take into consideration that, hey, maybe we shouldn't have given this particular product to this certain company, or hey, maybe people just didn't want to buy the product because it wasn't that good. Like, it's frustrating, especially when they do it after just one game not selling that one. It's like, oh, well, okay, that's it. Obviously, nobody wants anything. No need to
Again,
give any
also-
surveys.
Also, double standards, Jova. These thing crashed and burned the franchise, but despite Beyond Two Souls, David Cage was allowed to make another game.
Did Beyond Two
Well,
Souls
technically-
not sell well?
Well, technically, Tail, Beyond Two Souls was profitable. Yeah, it didn't sell as much as Heavy Rain, but it did.
But it was
sell-
also vastly negatively received and all.
Well, Sony tend to care more so
Well,
about
you
the
already know that
sales.
companies care more about sales than reception.
Like I mentioned, also
So-
double standards. Anyway, we recovered Sir Galleth's cane, which means it's time to play as him.
So-
Again, he's actually one of the more fun ancestors to deal with because his trademark technique is grappling and launching through rings, essentially. Not inside rings, but attaching to rings and then propel from there.
How can such a thing be possible?
It's complicated. Let's just say those balloons have machines that are like
Yeah, props for Bentley for managing to explain technology in the simplest way format to someone who doesn't understand it.
the only one who can reach them.
Say no more. I shall go forth to smash these airborne demons, lest they set their
I will admit,
wicked
I really
ways
do
to
like the
us.
voice cast that they did go out of their way to get for the lineage. Like, again, each
Not
one
just
is...
that, compared to Say No North for LF, you can tell that your Lowenthal is at least trying to and is having a bit fun having going over the top with Galleth.
My favorite's still Sam Riegel in this bunch because of his shtick and stuff, but yeah, each, hell, even Patrick Seitz was giving it his all.
The only one I don't have much experience is Ancestor number 5, which we'll meet in the next chapter, because if I recall correctly, is voiced by a particular type of voice actor, is the one that stands out the most. But again, we'll meet him in due time. But anyway, there you go. There's the gimmick. Grab through the ring, charge with R2, and then slash upward. You can use that to reach higher distances, essentially kind of like a long jump, and break through specific barriers.
Not to
You were
mention
saying, Pedro?
Not to mention, after the success of Heavy Rain, Quantic Dream managed to get a deal with Sony for 2 more games, so they would have made Detroit regardless. So, so remember, Tail, Knack was critically panned and sold like shit, and yet Mark was still allowed to.
Yeah,
make
that
it
too.
Which makes
Well,
the
that's
whole
because-
Sly thing even more infuriating. Like, and yes, I get it. Knack, we could maybe write that off as Sony's big favor to Mark, but come on, they just did Sly dirty. Like, and again,
It
look,
was more so Sony obliging Mark Cerny because they wanted to keep him as the console engineer of the company, basically.
I mean, I highly doubt that he was like holding his position hostage over having another Knack game. Like, I feel like this may have been a case where Sony just over-obliged the man. Like, again,
Which just begs the question, what Mark Cerny wants to do now. I'm pretty confident he doesn't want to just sit there without doing another game, with his direction behind. But what's gonna be? Knack 3, another new thing entirely.
hey, you know what? That's another thing, honestly. Out of all the people who said they absolutely wanted to make Knack 2, that was only Japan Studio who suggested it. Like, for all the interviews we had with Mark Cerny, there was nothing from him suggesting that he was the one clamoring for it. If anything, it was Japan Studio clamoring for it because, they
And
needed
it's arguable
something to work on out of desperation.
It was out of desperation, basically.
So, I mean, one has to wonder, was Knack 2 just the thing that didn't need to happen but Sony thought needed to happen? Because that would just make it all the more hilarious given how that game sold terribly.
Honestly, when it comes to Sly, I just think it's one of those cases where I honestly don't really care much to have a Sly 5 unless Sucker Punch is making it, to be honest with you, because history has taught me that the new developer taking over a franchise is almost never a good idea.
Okay.
Even so, Jova, the other thing that Jova suggests, just apply at the very least what you did with the Jack and Dexter series and have the titles at the very least, at the very minimum, as the PS2 Classic for the PlayStation 4 service.
Oh,
No, it's not even that.
Oh, sure. That is correct. Yeah.
Not only that, but again, I would normally agree with you, Pedro, But unfortunately, the way this game ends leaves the franchise in the worst way possible. But, you know, to explain fully would be to spoil, but I'll say this, I am sort of pushing for a Sly 5, if only so that the series can get its proper rest, because as it is...
That would be fine, Jova, but not if Censor would be making it. If
Well, at this
making
point,
it, then sure.
I
at this
highly
point,
doubt they
they probably
will.
wouldn't do it.
Oh.
No, okay, and I get the idea that Sucker Punch doesn't want to do much with it, or at the very least at the moment. Ghost of Tsushima aside, you know, they were just, you know, fine with what we did with Infamous, you know. Even though, like, repeating, they didn't change much of the structure of the games they developed. They only changed what the topping is. Now they actually look like.
Actually, you know, speaking of Sanzaru, there's some interesting trivia which essentially makes this the series equivalent of a Torsion run, especially. See, Sanzaru initially suggested that they would be interested in continuing the series after this game. Mind you, only interested. It was never definite, which means they had some big balls, given what they did in the ending. But, get this, in about a year later, on November 14, 2014, they then said they're not developing a future game. Like, so yeah, essentially this
That's
is
the
a
thing,
Torsion
Jova.
run.
Okay, and later on they still kept repeating that they had technically a script ready, but they will do nothing without Sony's approval.
I mean, yeah, and again, I'll just say this, companies. Unless you are absolutely confident that your game is getting a sequel, you know, like if it's in a very, very comfortable place, don't give a stupid ending. And again, I'm not even going to clarify what that stupid ending is because I ain't spoiling it. But let's just say, like I said, the ending leaves this franchise in the worst way possible. Like, Jesus Christ.
Instead, now, Bentley scanning has found something lurking inside the moat, actually, of the castle, and wants to have Galleth investigate what's supposedly going on there.
ATO.
Sorry, hello. Galleth believes it's actually a demon or something, but it's highly implausible. But go on, Jova.
Is Galleth just the most amazing Cooper to be able to be sneaky while clanking around in loud silver armor like that?
Galleth just doesn't give a single shit, and he owns it. Hello, goodbye.
Like, seriously, the guy is able to sneak around clanking around in armor. Either the enemies are just that stupid or he's just that great.
Both.
Carmelita, what are you doing?
Relax, Ringtail. Just keeping tabs on the Dragon Slayer.
I don't recall you watching my back on any jobs.
Only when I'm trying to catch you. But I find Galleth charming.
Okay, Carmelita, you seriously
Really?
need to stop with this "I want to fuck Sly's ancestors." It's very unhealthy. Like,
Might as well also mention, yes, like in the meantime, as I was wondering this in the previous part, and I figured out outside of these commentaries, Streets of Rage 4 is one of those rare cases where it actually did end up well of a new team taking over a franchise for a fourth game. You know, that being said, these kinds of things, the Streets of Rage 4 case, that's a once in a blue moon scenario. I'm not entirely sure.
It seems mostly applicable also to beat 'em ups because if I recall correctly, also what Way Forward did with River City Girls also applied.
Here's my stance here. Unfortunately, it is sometimes the only way for a classic franchise to get to continue. And sometimes it does work out. Eventually, look at Crash. Like, yes.
Also, technically, Pedro, Next Level Games with Luigi's Mansion and Punch Out, I guess.
That is true, but Next Level Games is basically Nintendo's Insomniac. They're on another whole level. They're not.
True.
I mean, to be
An
fair,
example of it.
yeah. It is an example of it working, like Shuri said. But again,
Sure.
to be fair with Crash, yeah, Rapid Cortex sucks. It's terrible, god awful. But eventually, Traveler's Tales got it right with Twinsanity. By the way, we still need a remake of that game with
Wrath of Cortex isn't that bad, but otherwise I agree.
And not to mention, Jova Twinsanity also is polarizing on its own.
Okay.
The boss fights of Wrath of Cortex suck. The general stages, not so much. They're pretty alright.
Okay, Shuri. Obviously, I was being hyperbolic there because, yeah, Wrath of Cortex, while being a lame sequel, is by no means the worst thing ever. That said, I don't find it fun. Like,
Twinsanity is a much better game, though, I think.
If I remember correctly, you guys told me that, aside from being corrected, Crash 4 actually sold well, didn't it?
Well, okay, it did sell good, but apparently not as good as the trilogy, which may or may not see Activision putting it on ice again because Activision got Activision. That said, though, yeah, from what
the idea was they were expecting insane trilogy numbers. That's basically what you're telling me.
Pretty much. Again, I'm praying Activision don't do the stupid thing and put the series on ice, or God, just confine it to mobile again.
Dragon is not flesh and bone, but iron and steel.
Turns out that the actual monster is a dragon, a three-headed dragon. The only catch is it's, well, really more mechanical. It's more machine now than reptilian, I guess.
Okay.
Galleth's idea to actually trying to decommission is creative, I will say, but instead of just charging in with his usual shtick. There you go. One particular thing was that this particular rope was bugged as fuck in one of the early tests, everyone noticed it. Yeah, apparently Galleth's solution is to just pull the plug. I mean, why not? Oop.
Backup generator?
No, it basically acted as a rebooting program. Shit.
Oh, so it was on charge. Why did you do that?
Because Galleth is kind of an idiot and doesn't know much about technology.
To be fair, as far as he knew, unplugging it should have done the job.
Yeah, it's not an unreasonable thought process.
And Galleth has got just eaten by Mecha King Ghidorah. Alas.
Sorry, have I missed anything?
Galleth just got eaten by this Mecha King Ghidorah dudes. Though, thankfully we have here Carmelita to the rescue, and I'll give credit when it's due, this is probably the best moment with Carmelita in the entire game, because we actually get an entire boss fight dedicated with her, and it's actually pretty good.
Hey Tio, you know how you mentioned that this should have been the penultimate level? Yeah, this is another reason this should have been the penultimate level, because it's much better what she gets to do here than what she gets to do in
Well, I did
World
mention
5.
it off commentary, it will become more clear in the next part, but yes, I do believe this entire section, not just this level, the entire chapter, should have been swapped in place with Chapter 5. But Chapter 5 is not bad per se, but as like the penultimate chapter before the final boss, it's like the point where the game kinda starts stumbling a bit towards the finish line.
Like,
it's complicated and it's like to what happens at the end of each chapter.
Like, on the one hand, I kinda get it. Maybe they wanted Chapter 5 to be the calm before the storm, but unfortunately the way it comes off, it just feels like a weird filler moment more than anything. And that's being nice to it, honestly.
Okay, since I actually don't show it that much, let me talk about it. Carmelita has a couple of actual new projectile types in this game. They actually got expanded. If you remember, in the original, when she was controllable in 3, she only had the auto-fire, which is the one I'm saying, which, to be fair, enters in the complacement gaming syndrome trope, as in, is the most efficient, so it's the one you're gonna use it anyway. But that's not to say that the other options are not bad. You have like the charge shot, like a triple spread shot, but with less fire rate. Like it's cute in how it's customizable. It's just that sadly it's connected to what I said during Chapter 2. Carmelita, aside from the free roaming, collectible and stuff, she's not used much in the actual story in terms of being playable. So you gotta work with what you have.
I
Considering
wonder
how much they have the hots for her, you'd think they would use her more, but I guess not.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say.
It's like what I said before. It's been very weird recently in the media. Like like characters who the creators apparently really love, or at least they say they really love, and yet they barely use them.
Or use them horribly.
Yeah, I mean. Kind of weird. Actually, no. I was gonna say a certain anime Toss manga, but that actually doesn't really fit. So.
Theo.
Okay. Yes.
I do wonder, do you think maybe it's a missed opportunity that none of the ancestors really get to have their own boss fights to do as well?
I suppose. Like I mentioned, it would have been properly neat if the final bosses for each chapter were like of a tag team between Sly and the ancestor cooperating to defeat them. Okay, I guess so, but I can live without it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Of the problems
keep in mind that despite having left the chapters of the other epochs, before the end of the game, each ancestor will have their own time to shine in some way. So don't worry, we haven't seen the last of them. Anyway, there we go.
I know that too. And like I said, of the problems I do have with this game, that is one of the lesser ones.
I feel as though I have been ground into sausage.
It's worse, Galleth.
Are you hurt, Sir Galleth?
Methinks I am still whole. I thank you, milady, but must confess, rescue by a fair damsel.
Oh, what's this? A woman rescuing a man.
That's supposed to be my job.
And she understands about this. Okay.
Okay.
That is...
Carmelita, stop it!
Hey, he's flirting too in this instance.
He gets the victory screen for that one.
Well, we started the mission with Injova. Gotta keep the tradition going.
I don't even understand what the hell they're trying to do at this point. Like, Mr. Ryder, whoever you are, because Theo can't find out your name.
Oh, don't worry, it gets worse.
Okay.
Is that credited in the credits?
No. Okay. I am
asked
trying.
his name to get removed.
Okay. Maybe I haven't checked it far enough. I will try to do it in between parts. I swear to check back again. But I swear, keep in mind, Pedro, if it was so, it would be just easy to have been credited in pages like say Wikipedia and the other sources where this game is credited as much as the other members of the team.
And you haven't found it there either? Wow.
Not yet, at the very least.
Basically, as far as we can tell, nobody actually wrote this.
Alan Smithy did. I don't
You know what's sad, honestly? I would much accept the idea that nobody wrote this, because again, the writing's going to get pretty bad. It's bad already, but it hasn't gone to the crowning crown of crap yet.
Okay, as Bentley said in the recap, Murray, Galleth, and Sly will have to tackle each one of the places that Sly had already scouted, because in each of them, Bentley had found that something was wrong, as if that the places was containing something else, but back then they did not have the time to check. So instead, now it is the time to check what exactly is in those. Starting with Murray, I think Murray has to go either to the bakery or the shoemaker. Oops.
Boing.
But no, again, Jova, I get what you mean with also the writing starting to decline a bit, but I still do say that, okay, it's not like a complete it's like a completely still stable, but I don't believe it degenerates too much, aside from those couple of points that we mentioned already a couple of times. I still do believe chapter 5 in general, on its own, is technically fine. It's just the fact that it's sandwiched between what happens in this chapter and what happens in the finale.
Not to mention chapter 5 has that major out-of-character moment for Carmelita that... Yeah, as far as I've seen, everyone has called that moment out.
It's for the final mission anyway, but again, all in due time.
Okay.
Also, trivia, a Star Fox reference because the tavern is called Sleepy Toad. Ha.
Okay, Tio, I do sort of get where you're coming from, and yes, I agree. Chapter 5 is not as bad as chapters 4 and 6. It's just that the problem with chapter 5 is, well, like you said, it's ironically kind of just there in the grand scheme of things when you get down to it. And unfortunately, people can just associate that with the story writing getting weaker, because nothing really big happens in Chapter 5 except for, that one bit.
Alright, Murray's mission is actually in the tavern. I completely fucked up what the place he was supposed to go. But it's very simple. Just destroy the metal mixing machines in order to stop to overproduction by chucking enemies into it. It's just like in Paris in the second game. Yes, Luis?
Yeah, Jervis California. You were partway through your sentence about talking about Chapter 5. You're like, but Chapter 5 is, and then the text came up, in need of remodeling. It's like, is that your opinion on Chapter 5? It's in need of remodeling?
You know what? Yeah, actually. I mean, because look, Chapter 5 is not terrible, but it is not really that interesting either. Like, and I do mean that the level does not really do that many interesting things with it compared to the other levels. Like, for as much flack as I gave World 3, even that one felt like it was doing more with its gimmick than World 5 was. And when World 5 does do stuff with its gimmick, well, people hate that. I won't spoil what, but you'll know when we get to it.
There we go.
But, yeah, no, that's the thing. I can't really think of anything particularly remarkable about Chapter 5 TO, like... I mean...
The costume?
I guess, but...
It's a cute set of references to boot. Also, there is particular mission that is reminiscent to particular type of co-op, side-scrolling, like, say, The Adventures of Cookie and Cream. I know that it's a rather obscure thing to say, but... trust me, it just works. By the way, a game, what I just said, it's a game done by From Software.
If you're into those references, I guess all the more power to you, but whenever I play World 5, I'll admit, okay, to be fair, part of that was due to Chapter 4, but I just always find myself checking out by the time I get to Chapter 5. Like, it's just hard for me to care when the story... again, jumps off the deep end like it does in this chapter.
Oh, it's a good thing, but I actually like the gameplay enough to, bypass that.
Yeah, I mean, gameplay is...
Hey, T, just describe my feelings on the 2016 Ratchet and Clank.
Well, okay, in that case... Hold on.
You go on, Pedro.
In that case, too, I'm curious, because I gave the same argument to you when it comes to the battle system of Fairfriend Seraph, and you said, and I quote, yeah, but it's an RPG, whatever, like, so is it just for
when
RPG
did I actually say it? I forgot which specific part, mind you. Like, which specific part, because if it was the final part, I can tell you it wasn't in my full mental condition.
No,
it was not the final part. No, trust me, Tio, gameplay was the last thing on your mind during that final part.
You were saying, and I quote, I just want to like something about you, Gabe, just anything. And I told you, I like the battle system, and you were like, it's not enough. You said.
Well, in that case, it's because we're an alternative with Neptunia. At the very least, like you yourself said multiple times. Sly's type of gameplay is kind of unique in its own. There's not much like it.
Well, that's sadly the thing, though.
Well, that being said, I would like that this type of gameplay did not exist in the fucking first place. But
that being said, though, Tio, that goes back to my point I mentioned, though. Yes, the gameplay of Sly is unique, but there is absolutely nothing stopping them from just attaching it to a game that doesn't have a sucky story. Like, and again, that's the thing.
No, I understand that. It's just that, as long as this would be the one alternative, I'm actually pretty fine with it.
I mean, okay, now, don't get me wrong. The story does not make it impossible for me to enjoy the gameplay when it's good, mind you. And that's the thing, even the gameplay. Like I said, there are things that make this gameplay definitely the weakest of the games for me, honestly. So even that's not always enjoyable.
But that's the thing we just had to disagree upon, because again, I still believe this is actually the one, well, 6 axis aside, obviously, is the one that actually refines the formula to a T.
Well, yeah, okay, agree.
Honestly, too.
Yeah, Pedro?
As someone who plays Dr. Koloshima's Brain Training and Brain Age, I can tell you that I love myself just a good menu for some good puzzles. Like, I need story for that, but I can tell you something too. I would be very hard pressed to like a Lytton game with a sucky story just because of the puzzles themselves.
Not only
it's just one of those things where I want the whole game to excel, not just one part of it.
Not only that, but like I said, I'd argue that Sly Cooper's identity was more for the story, characters, and world than the gameplay. Because yes, while the gameplay is technically unique, it's relatively similar to a lot of your stealth or thief-based sort of games, arguably. So, again, when what is arguably the game series' biggest identity, that being good story writing and characters, is botched, well then again, I ask, is it any surprise that this game didn't sell as well as the others?
The source of this plague that corrupts this land.
You also remember, Java, the fact it was at the end of the PS3 and it was against our competition to begin with. Sure, it was still a factor, but, there were other things at play.
That said, though, if the actual stuff that identified the series was good, surely the fans of the series would have come in more droves to buy it.
Well, Java, that's the thing. If by experiencing also this particular set of games and knowing about the rest of the world told me is that the fan base is also divided.
There's also the thing that I know that you guys don't want to hear this, but the truth of the matter is that at the time that this game came out, cartoony platformers were at an all-time low when it comes to their popularity.
I wouldn't say it was necessarily that they were an all-time low. It was more so companies kind of ushered in this self-fulfilled prophecy.
Also, I'm pretty sure each of us have said the same thing at a certain point, so...
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much that they were at a low bout of popularity, it's that companies were losing interest with them and pretty much kind of went out of their way to not give them as much a chance.
Well, let me put it this way, Jova. The truth of the matter is that games like Gears of War and Infamous sold more than the Ratchet & Clanks at the time, so that has to mean something. Because remember, I mean, it's one of those things. Look at it this way. It's the same thing as with back in the 90s, cartoon platformers were all the rage, of course. Because the truth of the matter, this isn't even just exclusive to video games. Fads, fads not the right word to use. Trends come and go. A lot of times, a specific genre of a specific part of media might have a low point in popularity. It happens all the time. Sometimes it rises again, sometimes it lowers again. It just and was it the 7th gen, the PS3 360 era, the 7th gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
7th gen was, let's face it, not an all-time high when it comes to popularity.
Oh no, I understand that, but the question that they always pose it is how much was it because of what what fans and in general non-knowing consumers actually had, and how much was instead companies pushing the new narrative?
Yeah, honestly,
here's the thing. Here's the thing, too. The popularity of shooters didn't just come out of nowhere. People,
no.
Gamers started growing, and they wanted to veer off toward other things.
Honestly, Teo does have a point, though, that, shooters selling well, that's fine, but cartoony platformers not selling well... Part of that was a narrative that companies were trying to push more than it actually being the truth. Because, again, we had stuff like Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex, still selling actually pretty well. Now, again, later games probably didn't sell as well because Wrath of Cortex was not handled as well, but that's more so on the quality of the platformers as opposed to platformers themselves just all of a sudden not becoming popular. Because, no, people still wanted them, but they wanted good ones, and because the interest in them with the companies wasn't in there as much, unless your name was Nintendo, chances were you weren't always giving the best of quality to your platformers, so, gee, what a shock, they suddenly became less popular with less quality.
But anyway, turning instead next part, where we finally destroyed the operational Black Knight, and we know just exactly what happened to Penelope because of the paradox. See ya.
See ya.
Was that fun? See ya.
See ya.